Welcome back. That's right, it's me, Gavin, still flying solo, the Mixed Reviews resident Scrooge, and I'm on the search for holiday movies that I can actually get behind. So this year, I'm inviting ghosts of podcasts past and podcasts yet to come to join me and present to me one of their favorite holiday movies. Who knows? Maybe I'll get the last slice of roast beef this year. This is the Mixed Reviews special presentation, Gavin's Holiday Gauntlet. Welcoming back to the show, writer, critic, and podcaster from the Untitled Cinema Gals podcast, Morgan Roberts.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I'm so happy to have you on. Now, you were on our Lynn Shelton episode, which was fully a suggestion by you, and I think one of my favorite shows of this past year. And I know it probably sounds like that I say that to every guest who comes back on, but it's true because, you know, I think as a film podcast, there are a lot of people in the industry that have a tendency to get overlooked or don't get to have their flowers given to them. Unfortunately, Lynn Shelton passed away, so we weren't able to sing her praises while she was still here. But I think it's important to be able to go back and look at somebody's career, even if it's a rather short career, and you know, eulogize them and celebrate them. And I just particularly love that episode because we don't get the chance to do that often on this show.
Yeah, well, I really appreciated the fact that you sent me a giant list of suggestions. And I was like, love this. Let's not do any of it.
Those were all the things we had done before. So I was like, just in case you didn't want, you know, like, so you knew what was not available.
No. And I was like, okay, let's do, because I mean, she had 8 feature films. Most of them were not like dialogue scripted. They were all outlines, which I think is really amazing because you have to get really good actors to be able to capture what you want as the director. And she also went on to do a bunch of prolific work on television. And it was just really nice to sit there and talk about someone who started their career much later in life and really, you found, especially after her passing, was so renowned and respected by her colleagues.
Absolutely. And so incredibly talented. And I think because she worked in a realm, the sort of improv, you know, lack of a script, that maybe she wasn't as recognized. I mean, she was also very much an independent filmmaker. The closest she ever really got to the mainstream was working in television, was, you know, doing these high profile, like Little Fires Everywhere and you know, Glow. But I think because of that, people tend to not know who she is. And so it's one of those things where it's like, it's great to do an episode that celebrates her and hopefully introduces her to a wider audience, or an audience that perhaps would not have seen her work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I had such a fun time with you and Louie on it, and just being able to watch all of her films and actually sit there and critique it. Because I always say she's my favorite filmmaker, and that's really hard to get people to be enticed about, because again, it's mumblecore, and you're thinking of like Joe Swanberg and the Duplass brothers, which have some hits, but have some really wild misses. Yeah. So, you know, it was kind of nice to actually sit there and be like, yeah, this is why was so magical with her work.
And honestly, and we won't even get into the sexism of society and the business and everything, but like, once again, you mentioned mumblecore, and the first 2 names that come to mind are men, of course. And it's like, no, she not only helped define this genre, she also really elevated it. So that's but we're not here to talk about Lynn Shelton, though I am always happy to do that now that I feel so well versed in her career because of you. We are here to talk about holiday movies, and so I gave you the task of finding a holiday film that you wanted to discuss, and I'm going to let you tell everybody what film you picked, and I'm going to give you the moment to describe the plot if they have not seen this very widely seen film. So I chose 2005's The Family Stone, which I think is just a delight because you have a host of incredible actors as they play the Stone family coming together for Christmas. The matriarch is played by Diane Keaton, and her eldest son is returning home with his very uptight girlfriend. And it is
really just a family trying to adjust to the lifestyle of a corporate sellout, being reintegrated into their very hippie family.
Excellent. And that's a good, that touches on the main plot points, but man, there is so much going on. I mean, this is a large family, even so much so that I've seen this movie a couple times prior to this, and I'd forgotten. So by the time that like Luke Wilson shows up, I'm like, dang, 5 kids? Like, wow.
They're hippies.
They're hippies, exactly. What is it that draws you to this film?
I think what makes the film more interesting is, I mean, it has kind of like the hokiness of family coming together for the holidays. There's a little bit of a black sheep. There's a significant other that people don't like. But at the same time, it's also about a family that is kind of healing from past trauma and it, sitting in anticipation for future trauma, because spoiler alert, one of the many side plot points is that Diane Keaton's character had breast cancer and her cancer has returned and she's not going to be receiving treatment for that. So I think that that's so interesting because we're kind of distracted by their sometimes pettiness and them trying to revert back into their family roles. But then you start to see glimpses of them just trying to preserve those moments because they know that their mom isn't, that this is probably going to be her last Christmas with them.
Now, I loved, first of all, I want to get this out of the way. I think all of the performances are really great in this movie, but I will say, and this is why I was excited to have you on to talk about this, this is not a film I like. This is not I will be honest. But I think everybody is really top notch in this movie. We did a Diane Keaton episode, and I especially think it's difficult to play somebody coming to terms with their own mortality in a way that they know they're facing, that this is the last Christmas. I think she becomes the easiest character to sort of understand in terms of the treatment of Sarah Jessica Parker's character, because she obviously wants her children to be happy, and she sees this woman coming in that she, from the jump, is like, this is the wrong fit. You don't, and I do not want my son spending the rest of his life with this woman just because he thinks that getting married would make me happy because I'm dying. And I think that also adds a layer to her character where she's a little harsher than I think a lot of the matriarchs in these movies are portrayed. The scene where he goes to ask her for her wedding ring, her grandmother's wedding ring.
Yeah.
And she's like, tough shit.
Yeah.
Is one of my favorite things, because I do think at that point, the lack of inhibition, the idea that she knows she's not going to make it to the next year, she's like, well, no, I want you to know, I think you are making a mistake. And I think, as I said, I really enjoy all the performances, especially hers.
Mom, do you remember when I was dating Beckett Royce?
Oh, but she was great.
Whatever
happened?
She was nice. But what you told me was, when I met the woman who was to be my wife, that I should come to you. That I should come to you because you wanted that woman to wear your mother's wedding ring. Well, I've met that woman, and I want to ask you for the ring that you promised me. I want to give it to Meredith tomorrow. On Christmas.
No.
Mom.
I can't. That woman.
That woman?
Okay, Meredith. It's just, honey, I can't give you my mother's wedding ring so that she can...
You made a promise to me.
Tough shit.
She's maybe my favorite character in the film, but we'll get to that. But I am curious, when was the first time you saw this movie? And I know you've actually written a review, so you should mention where people can find that review.
Oh yeah, so I wrote a review for the online publication In Their Own League, because we were talking about some of our favorite holiday films, and this has always been one of mine. I think I saw it very shortly after it came out. I didn't go to theaters to see it, but definitely, to age myself, went to a Blockbuster to rent it, because I was in a very deep Rachel McAdams phase, who is my favorite character in the film. And it's really interesting because I think on the first watch, I was kind of like, well, this was not anything that I expected. And as I've gotten older and like continue to rewatch it, there are some really tiny things that they do in their performances that I think were probably a little bit ahead of its time, though there are some things in it that are like very mid 2000s that you're like, okay, that is appropriate for the time that this
I would
occurred.
also say that there's some things that occur in this movie that are way prior to that, but I'll get to that in a moment. But
yeah, but I mean, like, you know, you have Elizabeth Reeser, who's playing the eldest daughter, who is kind of in a matriarchal role as well, because she is trying to be supportive of her brother, who brings this woman that no one really likes, but she's also trying to sit there and validate her other siblings' feelings. I think that Amy is my favorite character, mainly because as the film progresses, you realize how close she was with her parents, especially. And so I think that Sarah Jessica Parker's character is an easy target for her, because instead of letting out the sadness and anger that she has about the situation, she can just be particularly mean and cruel.
And she is. And that's, I will say, one of the things that is unique about this movie is, and I wish perhaps maybe the movie didn't want you to like her as much as they do, but she's also Rachel McAdams, so it's really hard to hate her. But she's mean. She's is mean.
She's very mean and an instigator.
And this is not me defending Sarah Jessica Parker, because Sarah Jessica Parker does some shit in this movie that is not right. But I will say that the way that this movie sets up its characters is, you know, he's coming home with this woman and none of the family really knows her. And also, by the way, guys, don't do that to your family. No. don't introduce the woman you're going to marry for the first time as your fiance. Like, ease in.
No, he's just coming in hot with like, it's mom's final Christmas. Here's this crazy lady that I'm about to marry.
Exactly. Big mistake. Huge. But I will say, all anybody has to go on is Rachel McAdams' character. Mm-hmm. And she arrives maybe 10 minutes beforehand, and she is poison. She's just like, I'm going to pour this poison in your ear. I'm going to tell you all about, I went to lunch with them. She wouldn't shut up. And I was just like, okay, let's calm down. And also, sorry, and I will let you get back. I don't mean to interrupt your thought.
No, you're good.
The scene in which they play charades, she is so cruel to Sarah Jessica Parker.
Oh, yeah.
And I am happy, actually, that Patrick Thomas, Thad's partner, we haven't even touched on Thad. Thad is I want to say, if I was to guess age range, right? Would you say Rachel McAdams is the baby and Dylan McDermott is the...
Well, so the lovely part about renting DVDs at Blockbuster is that they used to have these cool things called DVD commentaries.
Kids, DVDs, you really missed out. You really missed out on those.
But what's really interesting is they had a very intricate backstory. And this film just plops you in the middle of it, where all these actors had... I think that's probably why their performances are so great, because they are fully fleshed out people before we get to see them. And so, yeah, Rachel McAdams is the baby, and there's a whole plot about how she moved back home to help care for her mom, which isn't explicitly said. And then, yeah, so I think Thad is probably next youngest.
Okay, that's sort of what I was going. That's where I thought. I thought like, in terms of the lineage, I was like, Thad, maybe next. Thad's character is their second youngest brother. He is both deaf and gay. He has brought a black partner home with him, and I like, this is part of the movie that kills me because they feel very tokenized. And so it's kind of hard for me to watch the stuff that Patrick, his partner, goes through as the only black person in the cast. Rachel McAdams, there's a famous scene where they play charades and Sarah Jessica Parker gets the clue the bride wore black. Patrick shouts something at her, a suggestion, and she points at him while she's supposed to be doing the final word. And Rachel McAdams jumps. I can't believe you're pointing at him.
I can't believe you're pointing at him.
What? Who?
No, you're totally pointing at him.
Which guy?
I wasn't pointing at him.
You still are.
No, I'm not.
Oh my God!
Is he a clue?
Fourth word.
I wasn't.
Fourth word.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, Meredith.
Oh, you guys are such unbelievable.
No, Meredith, don't
jerks.
quit. Come on.
What just
Shorty,
happened?
fetch that for me, please.
I don't even know how to read.
What was the answer?
The bride wore black. Thank you, Amy.
I'll be honest, and something I've never noticed in the couple times I watch this, Patrick calls her out on it.
He does, which I think is one of those things because it's set up that he's going to be calling her out because she is there talking and signing, which Rachel McAdams, by the way, was really good at being able to act and sign at the same time. It's a difficult thing to do. But, she's talking about how much she hates Meredith and how she's annoying. She has this throat tick and all of these things. And he was like, you didn't like me the first time you met me. And she's like, I love you. And he was like, this took a while.
Yeah, this took years. Yeah.
So, I mean, like I think that the person who picks up the most on Amy's toxicity is Diane Keaton's character, Sybil. Because I think that they have a very kind of close, slightly enmeshed relationship because her character went to go live with her parents to take care of mom. But I think one of the things is everyone hates it because they're mean, but it's just Diane Keaton and Rachel McAdams who are particularly mean. Like everyone else is
I never remember the fact that Craig T. Nelson's actually quite nice.
Yeah, he's a great patriarch in it. And I think what's great is watching him and Luke Wilson have a scene together where they go and get stoned. And I think it's such a great scene because in my mind, Luke Wilson's probably like the middle child because he is much more easygoing. He's the one who brings pot to Christmas. And so he just is kind of having Thad is trying to have a family. Our eldest daughter's trying to have a family. Who knows what Dermot Mulroney's doing over here. We know that Rachel McAdams is just a sad, crazy youngest child. I just need to be straight with someone that this is what's happening. And it's a kind of a sad, sweet moment.
I do appreciate that you ended up knowing from the special features that element, especially of Rachel McAdams, because I think something like that, and this isn't a short movie. I don't want to be like, oh, well, the movie should be much longer. It's 104 minutes. It's a good running time for a comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I almost wish there was some key to that because I can only judge a movie based on the movie that's presented. And that is such an important piece of backstory information because she's essentially the third or fourth lead in this movie.
Yeah.
And you end up spending a lot of time with Rachel McAdams' character, even so much so that the film feels like it owes her a sort of happy ending. So that you get the introduction of this character played by Paul Schneider. He's an EMT that she's had a previous relationship with that, things sort of seem to sour, but now that she's back in town, maybe stuff. And also, by the way, Paul Schneider is fucking hilarious in this film. When things are chaotic at the end and he stops to introduce himself to Claire Danes.
Yes, it's great.
So funny. I've been in a social situation with Paul Schneider. Weird dude. Good weird. Not creepy weird, but weird dude. But I will say, I wish the fleshy stuff that's not there for Rachel McAdams was there because and once again, not to defend anything Sarah Jessica Parker does in this movie, but when she gets her comeuppance in the end, when, her strata spilled all over her and she's finally calling the family out, and which I think is actually my favorite scene because of the dialogue there, even though there's so much chaotic stuff happening. She points at Rachel McAdams and she's like, and you're the worst.
Yes.
She's like, I'm the worst. Yeah. And I'm glad somebody acknowledges it, at least in the film, because I would be like, oh boy, how can they let this woman get away with this?
Yeah.
There's something you mentioned in your review, actually, about the eldest sister, Elizabeth Reiser's character, being sort of matriarchal. And there's a scene where she Rachel McAdams has fallen asleep on her and she's sort of petting her head in a very motherly way. And the way the shot is composed, you don't necessarily know that it's Rachel McAdams. And she has that line of like, she's peaceful when she's like this.
Yeah.
And it could either be her daughter or Rachel McAdams, which is a funny line if it's her daughter, because her daughter's been nothing but an angel this entire
Except
film.
for breaking that shoe.
Oh, true. Yeah. Oh, I forgot about the shoe. Yeah. Instantly warming to the family. She breaks Sarah Jessica Parker's shoe. I like Sarah Jessica Parker's response. It says so much when she just says, "It's okay. I have another outfit with another pair of shoes," or something. And it was just like, ooh, ice. But there, and I honestly didn't know that was Rachel McAdams' character. That she was like, and it adds a depth to their particular relationship as well.
I think it's really interesting because earlier in the movie as well, there's a scene where Diane Keaton's character is taking a nap and she goes and like sneaks up there and kind of snuggles with her mom, but she's in the quote unquote big spoon position.
Yes.
So she's essentially kind of being the nurturer for her family and not doing it in a very explicit way. Like she snuck away to go to her napping mother. She just let her sister fall asleep on her. Like I think that she brings such a grounding presence that is really easy to kind of overlook because you have, Sarah Jessica Parker being as high strung as any human could possibly be. You have Rachel McAdams literally just trying to burn everything down.
Yeah.
You have Luke Wilson kind of just being this weird hippie dude who's hitting on his brother's girlfriend the whole time.
Yes, he's so good. My favorite Luke Wilson scene, and that's because I'm only human, is the scene in which he goes to the car as, after the charades incident, Sarah Jessica Parker's character decides she's going to go stay at the inn in town, and he goes out to make sure she's going to come back to the house, and he is wearing he's wearing a t-shirt, but then also gray sweatpants without any underwear.
Yeah, he started the gray sweatpants.
Yes. And he's just stretching in front of her, and she's like trying not to look. She's looking respectfully, but it's so funny. And Luke Wilson plays that pitch perfectly because you're well aware his character knows what he's doing.
Oh, yeah.
But
he plays off that he's stupid, but
yes. Now, am I correct in thinking that he is the only character that doesn't know that Diane Keaton has decided not to continue treatment?
I don't know, because there was a scene. So after he gets stoned with dad, he comes home and is like sobbing with mom, and she kind of tries to shut it down. So I think that everyone is kind of figuring it out.
Yeah. Because
no one is explicitly saying it.
Because the scene that you mentioned with Elizabeth Reiser, where she spoons her in a motherly position, that sounds so weird, but that's exactly what happens.
Yep.
And she, Diane Keaton turns to her and she's like, "Who knows?" And then you also have the jewelry store scene between Thad and Dermot Mulroney's character, where First of all, Thad begs Dermot Mulroney not to marry this woman. If I had a sibling that did that, let me tell you, I would be so mad. Because once again, Thad has not given her a chance either. He's like, "Is this because of mom?" And Dermot Mulroney's like, "Of course it's because of mom."
Yeah.
And so I felt like, I was like, so is the only kid who doesn't really know Luke Wilson?
I think that they have all kind of figured out that it's back. But I think that that's kind of I don't think anyone has explicitly said what she's doing and not doing.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of why everyone's like, look, we don't know what's happening with mom. So we have to make all of these wild and crazy decisions because who knows what's happening. Where I think Craig T. Nelson's character essentially is like, I'm the only person who really knows that this is the time frame that we're looking at. And he had to tell someone.
Their relationship is, once again, to me, it's the most fleshed out. It's so tender and so sweet. I think one of the most famous moments in the film is there's a montage of sort of how everybody is spending this night together after this climactic dinner scene, which I will talk about, or I will,
Yeah.
we'll bring up next. But, you know, it's this montage of everybody together, what they're doing that night. And she's in bed with Craig T. Nelson, and he opens her shirt to reveal her mastectomy scars.
Mhm.
And that scene is so well handled and so delicate and emotional that I was like, why can't I have more? And I get it. Once again, this movie's a big throwback. This movie's like a big trying to be. It's funny that both you and your co-host Chels picked screwball comedies, because that's what this is.
Yes.
This is meant to be that sort of late 40s, you know. And so I can't completely be like it's a bad movie, because it's taking a lot of beats from there. But that, I wanted more of that. I wanted more of that touching, you know, those tender moments that really allow these characters to blossom and bloom and to feel really lived in. That I think is maybe one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and not played in sort of a shocking manner, and not played. It's just played as a fact of their lives. And the moment of their life that you're seeing is the moment that they are living in.
Yeah. And I think too, like, again, this movie came out in 2005, so May 2004.
Yeah.
At that time, we really were, you kind of stayed in your lane. You were a comedy or you were a drama. And so I think that this is kind of and this was a Fox film. So like they had money. I mean, you have Craig T. Nelson and Diane Keaton as the heads of this family. And then you have all of these other, and Sarah Jessica Parker's Sex and the City, Claire Danes.
I mean,
everything.
Genuinely. And they spent, you know, it's an $18 million movie, and it looks it's not a cheap film by any means. And it made 92.9 million. So it's certainly even regardless of any critical commentary, it was a success. So,
but it was interesting that this was kind of one of their almost like first attempts to take, like, you can have funny moments and sad moments and it can still be a comedy, because life is kind of like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that there is definitely room for improvement, but for what was happening at that time in film, I think that it definitely was trying to muddy the waters a little bit to hopefully elevate the genre later on.
There are two more things I want to touch on before we wrap up. One, I do want to touch on Claire Danes, whom I love. And once again, no weak link in this cast. Claire Danes is Sarah Jessica Parker's sister, who, after having such a terrible time, she has called her sister in to sort of act as a buffer. And as Dermot Mulroney puts it, she has given up her Christmas with her family to come spend their Christmas because her sister is so miserable because of the way the family is treating her. Claire Danes comes off a bus. Instantly, Dermot Mulroney falls in love with her. She falls from that bus. And because of that, the family loves her.
I think, well, because I mean, like, her character is much more like indie and a little less pretentious, not as high strung, or at least outwardly high strung. Because I think that there are moments later where it kind of is like, oh yeah, that's why they're siblings, because they both have the same like freaking out.
And I think that goes back to the fact that, like, it's all really good performances, because like you genuinely get a sense, and much in the same way that the Stone family are all related and they make sense together, you definitely get the sense that Sarah Jessica Parker and Claire Danes are related. And, you know, siblings aren't exactly the same. You know, I have two older sisters. We're certainly all very different people. But there are things that you share, commonalities that, and I think that is played really well.
Yeah. And I think, because I mean, Sarah Jessica Parker comes in and is like awkward because she doesn't like, she's like Ricky Bobby not knowing what to do with his hands. She's like, where do I belong? What do I do? And then when she's integrating herself in the family, like, she is just nonstop talk. And, you know, in a family of 7 people, you can't have one person that's like trying to dominate attention and conversation and stuff like that. Like, she just doesn't understand that. And then you have Claire Danes show up and she's like, oh yeah, I felt whatever, I'm clumsy. And they're like, wow, she's so easygoing. Like, how great. what if she and Ben got together? Because I guess Luke Wilson needed someone because they were bored. But yeah, like they just had these very different introductions because they hold themselves very differently. But yeah, in a later scene where Claire Danes is kind of forced to try on this engagement ring, it gets stuck, and then she panics, and her and Sarah Jessica Parker like panicking together. It was like, okay, yeah, you understand.
And that's definitely a screwball comedy. Like, why would Dermot Mulroney ever force her to put on that ring? But that's what makes it a movie.
They also question it. They're like, why would he do that?
Right, exactly. Yeah, they seem to be. They're like, what is this? Calm down, everybody. The last thing I did want to touch on, I think, is the apex scene in the movie, the scene that everybody remembers, which is the dinner scene. It occurs maybe halfway into the film, maybe closer to 2/3 into the movie, but it's really the moment where you realize like how different Sarah Jessica Parker is from their family and how much she is not right for Dermot Mulroney. I will say once again, it does feel a little bit like an ambush, but she is wrong in this scene. And I think that, but essentially what happens is they're having dinner, and Thad and Patrick announce that, you know, they're gonna have a kid, or they're gonna adopt, and there's a comment made about Diane Keaton's character wanting all of her boys to be gay in her family, so they would stay with her, which I think is cute and very funny. And Sarah Jessica Parker comes back with like, well, you didn't want that, did you? Like you want normal children, isn't it hard enough? And like spirals from there.
Meredith. No, I'm sorry. I mean, please don't misunderstand me. I don't. Well, I mean, all I mean to say is that I just don't think that any parent would hope for a child to be challenged like that.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear a word you said.
Sorry, this isn't coming out right. All I'm trying to say is that what I mean to say is life is hard enough as it is, and it just seems to me that you wouldn't want to make it any more difficult for your child. I mean, Patrick, you must understand what I'm trying to say, right?
What did you say? Oh, well now, boss. I think we have been hit twice.
No, I'm sorry. I did not mean that. Honestly,
Why don't you try saying what it is you do mean?
Everett. I'm sorry.
Well, that's enough.
I just think any parent would want a normal child.
Oh! God damn you, okay?
Sybil.
Don't Sybil me. Just for the child's sake, just to make it easier for the child.
That's enough!
That scene is tough because I think that everything in that moment is built obviously to make you not side with Sarah Jessica Parker. And I do think you've been given enough information to determine that she is capable of something like that. But I kind of feel like, once again, not me defending her character, because she's a character I don't particularly like, and maybe would be kind of on their side if this was the real world. But it's unfortunate because it does feel like a trap that's been set for her.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think one of the things about it is they're clearly trying to condense an entire dinner into a scene. So like that's where it kind of feels like, oh, we're kind of going from, you know, them talking about adopting a baby, and then, you know, Claire Danes' character does kind of ask, you know, is there a preference on race? Because I think that that's kind of a normal thing to ask if you have an interracial couple. Like, is there something that, especially like, are you facing barriers, would probably be the more appropriate question.
And I think that's really where it comes in, is like she starts off down a bad path that she hasn't fully thought through. And I do think the movie does a good job of trying to get there. And unfortunately, everybody's sort of dogpiling.
And it goes there fast.
Yeah.
But like, I think if you were having a normal dinner conversation, you could totally see these characters starting to delve into that, because they are very much seem like very waspy Claire Danes and Sarah Jessica Parker's characters come off as these very waspy people. So, I mean, to ask, preference of child's race is questionable and not so great. But then, she's also very apologetic about it, of saying, like, I don't mean to offend. I'm really sorry that that's a question that I asked. And, they're very, like, quick, and she doesn't dig herself a hole after that. She doesn't keep asking. So I think that by doing that, they were trying to juxtapose how these sisters operate, where one will be like, look, I said something stupid. I'm going to apologize. They were gracious enough to answer. We're going to move on. Where Sarah Jessica Parker's character just keeps digging a hole. Because I think that one of the things that's established is she's someone who really likes to be in control. So when she sees that she is digging herself a hole, she wants to try to undo that, but then makes the situation worse. So I think it happens so fast that's why it feels particularly awkward. But I think that it would have been an inevitable conversation, because the way that she already was treating Thad, because he is hard of hearing, was like, oh, she really doesn't encounter people who are different than her, because she's just shouting at him. And it's like, that's not how
I always forget that her very cringy introduction to Thad is that she is shouting at him like a cartoon character does in a movie from the 40s where someone doesn't speak English, but I mean, that's also a really real response. Like when you see people who are being introduced to deaf and hard of hearing people, they shout at them. It's like, that's not, if you don't know American Sign Language, get someone who does. Say, I'm sorry. Or you've been dating this guy long enough, you could maybe learn a couple of phrases at this point if you know this about one of his family members. You don't have to be proficient. Just the fact, I mean, it's like going to another country and just learning, like, help, I'm lost, I'm sorry, I'm American, like in whatever language you're being integrated into. They're going to appreciate the fact that you're saying something to them, trying to communicate. But instead, she just shouts and then insults him by saying, you wouldn't really want all of your sons to be gay, because that's really tough and difficult, which in 2005 wasn't completely untrue. Right. No. And I will give, for as much as I'm complaining about tokenism, and I still think that is true, Thomas Bazucha, I believe that's how you say his name, who wrote and directed this movie, is a gay man. So I know that he's probably not attempting to downplay his own experiences or the experience of other queer people that he's met in his life, but the tokenism feels much more studio oriented and less personal oriented, because once again, as you said, there's all this stuff, all this backstory. They clearly like lived in these characters for a while, but films are made by corporations. They're made by groups. They're not necessarily made by a person. And so that's probably got whittled down until, unfortunately, they were like, well, these people are not the stars. These are not Sarah Jessica Parker, Dermot Mulroney, Claire Danes. So their story is going to have to take a back burner. And just be a catalyst for those people too. I do want to ask, as we're coming to a close, spoiler alert, if people have not seen this movie, you should, form your own opinions on it. At the end of this film, Luke Wilson, it's a year later, Luke Wilson is now with Sarah Jessica Parker's character. Dermot Mulroney is now with Claire Danes' character. They've all gathered together. Sybil, the matriarch of the family, Diane Keaton's character, has passed away, and it's their first Christmas without her. And everybody's sort of celebrating the decorating of the Christmas tree. Do you think, and I know that they kind of made their peace with Sarah Jessica Parker, do you think she'd want to be part of that family?
She had someone who kind of made her let loose in Luke Wilson's character. So and especially like they kind of did have a reconciliation towards the end of the film, because that I think why I love Amy so much is I too am a mean bitch who will cry at a sentimental photograph. So it's like, oh, I get that. Like someone kind of finally cracked that really hard exterior that she has. And, you know, she wasn't perfect during that trip either. So I think that there are crazier things that have happened in screwball comedies. And I don't think that tops it.
And that's sort of the reason they end up together, is that it is a screwball comedy. I do want to mention, by the way, and I sort of alluded to it earlier, after the dinner, Sarah Jessica Parker storms out. Luke Wilson goes after her. They get drunk in a local tavern. She has an amazing dance scene. And that's really where, like, I'm like, wow, Sarah Jessica Parker's very good at this. And that's also where, as Dermot Mulroney and Claire Danes are off to look for her, you know, they start to fall in love with each other. This is where that montage comes in of what everybody's doing that night. And, you know, everything comes to a head the next morning on Christmas. Sarah Jessica Parker gives everybody a really emotional Christmas gift. It's a framed photograph of Diane Keaton pregnant. Turns out she's actually pregnant with Rachel McAdams in the photo, not Dermot Mulroney, which was what Sarah Jessica Parker assumed. And this lightens everybody's mood towards Sarah Jessica Parker. Unfortunately, all of this then comes to a head when she admits that she slept with Luke Wilson, but not slept with Luke Wilson, slept next to Luke Wilson, causing a fight between Dermot Mulroney and Luke Wilson. She goes to the kitchen to start their breakfast. Diane Keaton and Rachel McAdams go after her because she's clearly upset and ruin her entire breakfast by hitting her with a door, causing it to spill everywhere, including herself. She finally has her big confrontation where she tells them they're awful, and everything gets chaotic from there. Like I said before, I love that scene where she tells them they're awful. And I think what makes me love it the most is, and it's kind of played as a throwaway line, but it's maybe the most important line in the movie, which is when she's like, what makes you people so great? And Diane Keaton says, we're not, we're just all we have.
Yep.
What's so great about you guys?
Nothing. It's just that we're all we've got.
We're not so great.
And you're the worst.
I'm the worst.
And to me, I was like, yes, this is your movie. Like, this is, but for me, it was maybe a little too late coming for that. I particularly like that scene. But I wanted to make sure that we got to it to talk about that.
Oh yeah. It's, that is, because I mean, her calling them the worst and Rachel McAdams being hurt by it, which I find hilarious.
Yes.
Because I'm like, you were actively tormenting her. You know this. You know this. I mean, you're mean about having to sleep on the couch.
Yes.
Like, suck it up, Buttercup. But yeah, that line where she's like, what's so great about you? And it's like, nothing. We're just all we have. And I think that you kind of get hints at that by the way that they all kind of start to regress to who they were growing up in that house. But I think that by actually vocalizing it, you're like, okay, yeah. So my sneaking suspicion that this really weird family is a little bit enmeshed in some places is kind of why they're acting absolutely chaotic.
Chaotic is a perfect way to describe it. That's, but they do it so well because they're a family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Morgan, thank you so much for taking your time out of your holiday month to come and talk to us about one of your favorite, well, talk to me, not us, Louis not here, to talk to me about one of your favorite holiday movies. I really very much appreciate it. I think what I'm taking away from this holiday movie and its very special holiday message is that even if you're with the wrong person during the holidays, see if they have a sibling.
Yeah.
It could work out.
It could work out. Sibling, a cousin, a first cousin, a second cousin.
A parent. What's their dad doing?
Yeah.
I'm just saying. Anyways, thank you so much. I'm going to give you a moment to plug whatever you want to plug and tell people where they can find you online. And once again, seriously, if you have not read Morgan's review of this film, go seek it out. It's great.
Yeah. So you can check out In Their Own League. We have an advent calendar going. You can read my extremely chaotic review / dissertation on why Doubt is a Christmas movie.
When I told Chelsea you were coming on, she's like, she's going to make you watch Doubt. And I was like, you know what? I'd watch Doubt.
Yeah. They fight over Frosty the Snowman. It's a Christmas movie. But you can check out our stuff over on Twitter at Their League, THEIR. LEAGUE. And then, Untitled Cinema Gals, we're just popping in and out every so often because Chelsea and I have been particularly busy, but we're on Twitter and Instagram at Cinema Gals. And go check out some of our past episodes. Gavin was on where we talked about turning 30.
Oh, you kids.
Us children. We had someone just rediscover the fact that we did coming of age films, and Chelsea said that Godzilla vs. Kong is her favorite coming of age film. So just go check out the chaos. So much like the Stone family, that's what we strive for over at Cinema Gals.
Well, Morgan, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking your time. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you're having an amazing holiday month. And I'll be back with another Gavin's Holiday Gauntlet soon. Thank you for listening to this The Mixed Reviews special presentation. If you want to contact us, you can always find us on Twitter at The Mixed Reviews. You can find us on Facebook. Just search The Mixed Reviews. You can always contact us by our email, reviewsmixed@gmail.com. Feel free to check out our Instagram @the_mixed_reviews. And if you want to continue listening to the rest of our episodes, subscribe on any major podcast app. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, Google, Apple, Audible, Amazon. And if you do listen to us on Apple or Audible, stop by, leave us a 5-star rating, and write a little review. We'll read it on the show. Once again, thank you for listening, and I hope you're having a happy holiday.